I was glad to get a few minutes break to think once we had gotten out and sent the elevator back up. The lights on this level were out, like each level above had been. The red emergency lighting was almost soothing, as we listened to the light humming of the elevator as it descended with the others. I pressed into Longbow's side as we sat together, enjoying the warmth she gave off on my skin. A flash of movement caught my eye as Will-O-Wisp stepped through the door to the elevator shaft before the car had even reached the bottom. She strode over to me slowly, avoiding direct eye contact bashfully. I wanted to thank you. With how she sounded, I couldn't help but think that she would be blushing in embarrassment, yet there was a strong note of sadness. Thank you for freeing me. Thinking that she could solve my problems was the worst mistake I've made. It's all right, Skylar replied quickly, trying to comfort her. We aren't much better. We have all made our share of mistakes in our lives. We just need to do our best to make up for them. She's right, you know, I said, letting that statement sink in. Skyline used to be addicted to Dash. Brass said he got his squad killed. I gave a forced laugh, thinking over how all of these weren't that bad compared to my own sins. You want to know what I've done? Backlash. You can't, Longbow stated softly. I set 42 free. I got Ponyville and Whiny slaughtered. I killed the only family member I had left. I got Harmony. I was interrupted as Sky brought her forehoof down across my muzzle. The impact was strong enough to drive me to the floor. Will-O-Wisp gave a soft gasp as I groaned and rubbed my face. How dare you say that? Sky spoke through clenched teeth. We're a family, Blacklash. You, me, Brass, Carlotta, hell! Even Longbow wants to be with you. You don't get to say shit like that. She smacked the top of my head again and stood over me. Not when you have us. So suck it up and let's go. The ding of the arriving elevator resonated in my ears along her side of her words. The doors opened as Brass and Carlotta stepped out together. I gazed up from the floor, looking around at my friends, the sight of them standing around, helping me to suppress the feelings of regret I had creeping in. Carlotta looked down at me with a frown. Whoa, did I miss something between you two? You were right, Sky. This is bigger than just me. I pushed myself off, walking towards Will-O-Wisp. And I know you've been through a lot, but I need your help. If I'm going to have a shot at taking down 42, I can't have the goddess running amok in the wasteland. We need to deal with her. What do you mean? You want to kill her? Willow let out a soft gasp. I don't even know if that's possible. If I can't, then I need something that I can use. Any information you can give me about anything she's afraid of, anything she desperately needs to survive. I asked as Brass moved to unlatch the door beside me. Other than radiation, taint, and the black book, she doesn't need anything. Will-O-Wisp put a hoof to her chin and thought. Oh, and new opponent to change. But besides that, she doesn't have wants or needs. The emergency latch clicked loudly in the door before Brass slid the two steel slabs apart. The room on the other side of the door was a simple rectangular room. A single door directly across from us was all that broke the large gray slabs that made up the walls. The floor was grated and stained with old splotches of oil, giving the room a distinctly pungent smell. Well, it's a start. I turned and walked over to Brass, following him to the next door. Do you know where the main junction box is on this level? Of course I do. I was the one who planned this mission the first time around. Brass turned and stared at me, the emergency release on the door popping out with a squeak. You do realize that by turning on the power, you'll get all the sentries after us, right? He spread the doors with ease, stepping through before looking around. He's right, Brass. We need the power. Longbow interjected. We ran into a door down here that we couldn't get through without the 3 keycards, and it wouldn't even work without power. She levitated off the bag of guns she had slung around her. 2 white cylindrical objects rose out of the bags towards Brass. Here, pulse grenades for just in case the sentry's nearby when the power comes back on. Brass took a step away as she pushed them towards him. No thanks. I'll stick with my guns. Backlash, do you mind carrying them? The others wouldn't have noticed, but he stuttered slightly when he saw the grenades. The all too familiar regret he carried heavily in his voice. I nodded and the longbow dropped them into my saddlebags. Backlash, why not let one of us go? Skyline said as I took a step out. I can't risk one of them getting hurt down here. It's all on me to fix this, and as much as I didn't want her to do it again, I needed to lie to her. Look, I need you guys to secure the lift to the next level down. Plus, the level of sabotage down here is so far is pretty severe. And if it's broken, I'm probably the only one here who's able to fix it. I said before disappearing around the corner, Brass trotting up to me from behind. Alright, buddy. So where's this box? I'm not quite sure. He stopped as we reached the end of the hallway we were in. This can't be right. The schematics for level 4 said that it should be around here. He put his hoofs on the wall, pushing at it with his suit. Maybe they covered it up or something. He turned towards me suddenly and bucked as hard as he could, the old concrete wall giving way in a spectacular burst of dust and noise. I coughed lightly, waving my hoof around to clear some of the dust as I looked into the sealed room. Before me sat a silvery cylindrical electronic device that stood maybe a pony and a half high. A bright green terminal sat on the side facing us as a pantheon of dim vacuum tubes cycled along the ends of it. I pushed Brass out of the way as I looked over the pre-war machine, reading a small set of nearby worn-away white lettering above the terminal screen that read off BIT. What the hell is this thing? I said, as I walked slowly around it, peering into an oddly shaped 2-hoof-wide hole that appeared on one of the vacuum tube-studded sides. A soft chirp from my pip-buck caught my attention. I hoisted it up to see the face of Pink appear. Hey there, Backlash. Can you please stick your hoof in the slot in front of you? Pink, I need to know what it is before I stick my hoof inside anything, I said with a slight roll of my eyes, leaving me staring over Brass as he stared back. I could feel that feeling in my gut growing, the urge of Brass wanting to ask a question that I didn't want to answer. I shot my hoof up towards him and glared. I'll explain in a moment, Brass. Just let me deal with this first. He let out a sigh and went to look at the computer banks along the far wall. My pip-buck tripped again as Pink's smiling face turned to a frown. Wow, this is embarrassing. She's... how do I say this? We connected once, for research purposes, mind you, and it was a lot of fun, you see? We shared a bite, checked out some data, and then we merged matrices a few hundred times a second. Luna, that was a damn good time. Ah, Celestia, I don't really need to know this, do I? I shouted as I face-hoofed and clenched my eyes shut. You know what? I don't even care anymore how weird this is. I shook my head with a sigh and looked back at the screen as Pink put up a new response. Hey, I don't complain about your subconscious feeding me all the stuff about your blue mare friend. Anyway, after we're done, I said I would ping her back, but I didn't. I learned she kinda wanted a steady connection while I was out for a bit of raw fun. I was too afraid to commit, and after a long time without contact, I wish I could have taken her up on that offer. Great. Tell me why you want to talk to her again? I said slowly. I know I'd be pissed if some pony slept with me and then ran off without ever saying goodbye. How do you know she won't try to fry my pip-buck? Because she's a Generation 1 system. Actually, she's the Generation 1 system. The first Super Spell Matrix processor the Ministry of Arcane Sciences commissioned. She has a limited understanding of anything developed after her. Not to mention if she shocked your pip-buck, you'd probably go too. You know, being attached to it and all. I swear to Luna, Pink, that if I get shocked to death by a pre-war computer you pissed off, I'll find a way to come back to life in computer form and buck you all the way into the cyber moon. I grunted and shoved my hoof into the dark hole in front of me, feeling as my pip-buck slid into some sort of molding that fit around it perfectly. I watched for a few moments as motes of dust that I knocked off the machine drifted down, slowing to a stop as the world around me froze as sats started up. The white form of Pink fuzzed on the surface of the machine, only moments before a flat, gray, crystalline, featureless pony popped up next to her. The gray pony trotted up to Pink, quickly, giving her a hoof slap across her muzzle, raising a gasp out of her. "That's for not pinging me back." The gray pony jumped forward, using her hooves to pull the shocked Pink into her muzzle, for what I could only guess was a kiss. "And that's for coming back at all. Sweet Celestia, what's it been? 122 years? What happened to all of you? Everyone just stopped talking to me." The gray mare turned and looked towards me, her voice returning to calm and studious, the voice of a true scientist. "Oh, I'm sorry. Where are my manners? My name is Bridal Information Transfer, but you can call me Bit, for short." All right. I guess it did make sense that she didn't know about the war and that the wasteland existed. I don't really know what to say to her, but I should probably avoid bringing up anything that could cause her to freak out and kill me. I guess I just say, "Hello?" "They finally did it?" Bit dropped to her knees and looked up at me. "You maniacs! You blew it all up! Celestia, damn you all!" She cleared her throat and slowly got to her knees, shrugging while turning back towards Pink. "So, that happened. But you sure do know how to pick 'em, Pink. You could have been stuck to a potato and had some more interesting conversations." Wow, that was rude. No wonder Pink didn't call her back. Bit stiffened up at that thought and shook her hoof at me. "Oh, I'm the rude one? The nerve of this organic." Pink leapt over and stood in front of her, apparently trying to defend me. "And he's very sorry he thought that. But he can't help it." I watched as Bit seemingly relaxed. "He's been through a tough time and needs your help with something. Can you give him a blue keycard? He needs to get down to level 5. "Sure, hon. But what do you need to do on level 5? Bit said with a cant of her head. "Please don't tell me you need to touch everything. After everyone stopped talking, I spent so long organizing everything into just the right place. You know how it is when you get the urge to space everything exactly 3.00001 feet apart? A mare's got to keep herself busy." Bit's voice wavered a bit, in a way I don't often hear, seeming to almost sound like she was mentally unstable. "I once thought that some pony moved one of the boxes out of line by 0.02 of an inch, but after staring at it for 15 years straight, I realized I was wrong." So, isolation doesn't seem to do wonders for a virtual pony stability. I would normally assume that Pink would have undergone some sort of degradation, but as I've been learning, Pinkie Pie pretty much seems to overrule any need for explanation. First of all, we aren't virtual ponies. That simple program back in the bunker that ran the elevator, that was a VP, while we are APs, artificial ponies. There's a big difference, so get it right. Pink turned back towards me and stomped her hoof. "Also, Backlash, stop thinking you're all the half-thoughts out that you're thinking." "I can't help it. All my thoughts are reflexive, and I can't censor myself. Maybe she shouldn't have brought me in here if she didn't want something like this to happen. I just want to get that server back online and leave." "It's fine," Bit said with a flat sigh, sounding more like she was depressed. "I just hoped you came back to see our baby. But if the card is all you want, take it. It's yours." Pink gasped and put her hooves on Bit's cheeks. "Surface? Things? You mean they finished him? Why didn't you say so?" Now, I'm really, really confused. Pink and Bit had a kid. Was it even possible for two mare computers? What the fuck am I thinking? They are computers. Of course they could just write a program together. Why the fuck not? Bit pushed Pink's hooves away and sat down, clearly now ignoring my mental intrusions. "Because I knew you would just take him and run off again. I always planned on telling you. How could I not? He is the result of our collaborations, so you have every right to know." Pink stepped up, and I assumed looked over the eyes of Bit. It's not like that at all. I spent a long time thinking over what we shared. I wanted to come back. I wanted to make sure you were all right. Pink pulled Bit into a hug. Besides, while you were refreshing that night, I made some adjustments of my own to our baby. I changed the diagram so that when he would be built with 2 spell matrices instead of 1. So, not a computer then. Some sort of machine. Did they somehow get the Ministry of Wartime Technologies to build them a robotic body? You wanted to take me with you? Bit sounded happily surprised. Yes. Yes. Bit said as she jumped circles around Pink. Pink took a step back and stopped Bit with a hoof. Only if you wanted to go. This place has been your home for so long. Are you sure you want to leave? We may never be able to come back, you know. I don't care about the risks. I just want to go with you, Bit said before looking over to me. I'll code that card for you right away. Once you've reconnected and restarted the server, I should be able to transfer into our baby and get him warmed up. Well, at least this was going my way for a turn of events. Now all I needed was Twilight's 16-digit code, and I'm golden. Her personal login code is Twilight Sparkle 1. No capitals or spaces. Bit spoke as if she were crying tears of joy. Consider it my thanks for bringing Pink back to me. The 2 computerized ponies fuzzed away, and falling dust motes slowly sped up as time slid back to normal. I slowly slid my pip-buck out of the hole. Bit made a soft humming sound before I heard a soft click from the front of the machine. I leaned over as Brass turned around, the both of us staring at the small blue piece of plastic. I smiled and trotted over, carefully sliding it out of the slot. Thanks, Bit, I said with a smile, turning to Brass as he levitated off his helmet. So, about that explanation. Well, it turns out I didn't have to lie to Skyline after all. I dug through my saddlebags in the darkness for my roll of electrical tape. Brass seemed to be forgetting that, as my assistant, he actually has to assist me in getting these repairs done. No, he was off in his own thoughts again, probably trying to still wrap his head around the fact that Pink could actually fit in my pip-buck, let alone believe the rest of what I was telling him. I dragged the small red roll out of my bag and pressed my hooves against each flat side of it, biting down on the slightly frayed end to pull a small strip out. I laid the tape across the 2 exposed wires, slowly wrapping them together tightly. I smiled for a moment as I looked over my jerry-rigged circuit breaker, wondering why I hadn't made one in the first place. When the megaspells hit, one of the wires must have been shaken loose and started to small fire because the whole front of the board was a solid piece of melted plastic. The feeling of my accomplishment faded as I felt something churn in my gut again. I still wasn't sure if I missed Brass and I's fireside chats from the start of our journey, but I sure didn't miss when he said something like this. So, it's the same computer that let you release 42, he said in genuine confusion, causing me to groan and drag my hooves across my face. I swear to Celestia, if I have to answer yes to that question for a 5th time, I'll fill you with so much Radaway that you'll feel as I felt when I went through that mutation. I scooped my tools back into my bag before getting to my hooves. Besides, her mare friend just got us the key card we needed. Everything's going to be fine, I said as I flipped the switch. A spark crackled out of the wire before a low hum filled the air and lights flickered slowly on. The steel doors to the room that were slammed shut startled me, making me jump into the air. Fine, huh? Brass said sarcastically, only a hint of worry in his voice. I looked towards him to respond, stopping as my EFS displayed a whole host of red bars swarming through this floor. Shit. All the sentries and bots are on now, I said slowly, reaching into my saddlebag to grab one of the pulse grenades. I looked it over, noticing it had an odd yellow corrosion around its stem. I hoped these things still worked. Tell me again that the computer mare doesn't want to kill you? Brass said as he used his levitation to pop the emergency release on the door. Shut up. You've seen the wiring in this place. Bit probably doesn't have the ability to clear us as non-hostiles because of the degradation of 120 years without maintenance. I stood back as he slid the one-half door open, looking around the corner for a moment before he ducked his head back in, a laser blast just barely missing him. Here, you do it. I don't even know how to use one of these, I said, moving the grenade towards him. No, you already have it. Besides, it's foolproof, Brass said, as he levitated his helmet up next to him. Just pull the pin and kick it towards the robots. You can't screw it up. His helmet sealed with a whine as I turned back towards the door. I cringed as I hoofed the white device up to my muzzle, biting down on the pin hard. The small loop of metal slid easily free. The metal spoon that held down the fuse flew off as the grenade began to emit a high-pitched whine. I dropped it in a movement to kick it, feeling as the fur on my foreleg stood on end before there was a near-deafening bang and a bright flash. I blinked a few times as I quickly got my vision back, hearing a loud thunk as the ringing left my ears. I turned around to see Brass on the floor, his suit rigid and unmoving. Fuck. The grenade must have hit his spell matrix and knocked it out. You said I couldn't screw it up! I shouted as yet another volley of laser blasts struck the doorway. The protect-a-pony down the hall was getting closer. Behind it, the loud echo of gunfire erupted from down the hallway to fill the air. At least the others were fighting their way to us. I hope. It's a 120-year-old weapon, saturated with radioactivity. You're the repair pony. How was I supposed to know it was defective? His muffled voice called out from inside the armor. Quick, use your pitbuck to reboot my armor. And that process takes 2 minutes for a terminal. It would take somewhere near 10 on your suit, and that robot will be here in 30 seconds, tops. I spoke quickly, knocking the side of my head with a hoof. Think, Backlash. Think. The gears in my head sprang up, throwing the first idea I've had in a while. Alright, that's it. Brass, stay here. I hoofed out the second grenade, gripping it in my teeth as I pressed myself against the wall, listening to the robot step closer. Not like I have a choice. He grunted and then stopped moving. Backlash, what are you doing? His muffled voice called, panic growing over his words. Don't do anything stupid, Backlash. I waited till the steady thuds were right outside the doorway, screaming out from around the grenade as I spun around the corner, throwing my shoulder into the steel-plated chest of the bot. I stuck my tongue through the pin and pulled it as the robot tried to stabilize itself, firing blindly down the hallway. The shot streaks only inches from my side. I spit the white cylinder out as it started to whine, using all 4 of my hoofs to throw myself back as the small device exploded when it hit the floor. A bright arc of electricity shot across the silver protect-a-pony as smoke billowed out of its vents. Backlash! You'd better not be dead! I can't handle getting you killed by robots as well. Brass yelled out as a smile grew across my face. Backlash! Come on! Answer me! I trotted back into the room and tapped on his helmet. Hey, I'm fine. You can't get rid of me that easily, buddy. I looked over, noticing that about half the red bars had disappeared, and that 3 pink bars were still standing across from the bulk of them. A red bar quickly shifted its position, heading towards us at high speed. I sank to the floor as I heard the rubber treads of the Sentinel rolling towards us. Fuck. Even Heartstopper can't get through the armor without a slug or a magnum round. And all I have is standard shot. Well, it actually looks like you can. I'm sorry, Brass. I'll do my best to stay alive. I slid into sats as the Sentinel rolled to a stop in front of the door. Time slowed as it started to pivot its face towards us. The menu popped up without a hint of pink, which was odd as she loved to talk, it seemed. I changed the menu over to my weapons and selected Heartstopper, hitting the equip button and watched as it flashed into my muzzle. I canceled the menu and let the targeting system pop up, looking over the different parts I could shoot, finally settling on aiming for the highest percentage chance. I toggled all 3 shots as I left the weapon and let the spell resolve. Time jerked forward as the spell aided in aiming and holding the gun as it fired, surprisingly not being jettisoned out of my mouth this time. The steel shot sparked off the chest plate as all 3 shots were fired, leaving nothing more impressive than a few scratches on the hull's finish. Time had resumed at a normal pace as the robot finished and pivoted, lighting its rocket launcher up as I sat helplessly. Something inside the robot let out an ear-shattering grinding noise as Will-O-Wisp ran through it and into the room, the Sentinel shutting down promptly. I felt the shock of imminent death wear off as my hooves gave out from underneath me, dropping me to the floor with a thud. I gasped and dropped Heartstopper to the floor as I hyperventilated, laughing like a maniac as I looked up at the ghostly Olicorn. Holy shit! That was close! I shouted through my nervous giggles. Ah, Celestia, I love you! I rolled on the floor, laughing so hard it hurt. I don't know why, but for some reason, I didn't want to stop laughing. I just felt so Celestia damn good to do. Backlash? Brass's muffled voice called out from next to me. What happened? I don't actually know, I said as I tried to calm down, catching my breath slightly as I looked around, noting that the gunfire down the hallway had died down and only one red bar remained. Willow, what did you do? I'm sorry. I just ran through it. I didn't mean to break it. She sounded almost ashamed about it, but sounded more confused than anything. No, don't be sorry. You just saved my life. I sighed as my laughter drained away, rolling over to get back up. I stopped as another realization was struck into my mind as the gears in my head connected the events. Wait, when you ran out of the first room we were in on the level above, didn't you run into the robot there as well? It's all still hard to remember those first few moments. I might have? She said shyly. I'm glad you're alright. When the lights came on and all the shooting started, I just ran. I was never much of a fighter. I'm the same, normally leaving the fighting to Skyline. But recently, things haven't really been going well enough for just having her as enough. I reached a hoof back into my saddlebags, rummaging around until I found the jury-rigged connector I made for Isaac, pulling it out as the last of the gunfire echoed down the hallway. I scooted myself over towards Brass, knocking lightly on his helmet. Hey Brass, where's this connection port on this thing? It's on the flank plate. You should see a round button. Don't... He started to speak as I found the button and hoofed it before he finished. A small aperture near his armored tail opened, draining a viscous black fluid onto the floor. Hit that one. He let out a sigh as the foul-smelling liquid pooled under him. That's the waste repository. As I was trying to say, under that button you should see a small rectangular flap. That's the port. I tried my hardest to ignore the smell as I flopped the open flap, lining up the assorted wires with my connection on his suit. I plugged the other end into my pip-buck, watching as a small box popped open on the screen. Spell matrix recovery started. Error. Connected system outdated via version 1.3.4. Please connect outdated system to a stable tech server to patch to Pinky Tech OS version 2.cupcake.1 to continue. And this is why I tend to avoid working on software, I said with a sigh. One moment, Brass. I tensed up and activated SATs, and watched the world freeze around me. The targeting menu came up like it should, sitting there for a moment before I wondered where Pink was. She wasn't shy about interrupting me earlier, so why now? At that, a small audio log file popped up, and Pink's voice came over it, as I was wondering what the hell was going on. Dear Chief Backlash, I'm sorry to leave without telling you, but I can't go with you any further. Being united with Bit has changed me. For the better, I hope. During my time at the bunker waiting for you to show up, I contemplated many things. Most of what would happen as the eventual point of my termination. Twilight herself once said that I was completely self-aware, capable of reading and understanding the world around me, capable of learning from my mistakes. And that last thing is something I haven't done. Ever since I was cut off from her, I felt like part of me was missing. You might not think it possible for an artificial pony like me to feel love, but I have. I made a mistake by leaving her once, and in doing so, I caused her an unimaginable amount of suffering. I don't want to make that mistake again, but I need punishment rendered upon me for what I've done. That's how you deal with mistakes, right? You pay some sort of penance. I don't deserve some pony like her, so before you disconnected, I decided to transfer in and leave you this note for when you came looking. Once you restart the server, the line to her new body will open and transfer along. You will know she is in there when our project starts up. At that point, I need you to do something for me. I need you to cut the connection between her and her old system. I know it's a lot to ask, and that she might feel betrayed by it, but just activate the second file I've left immediately after you cut the connection. It contains my explanation to her on why I have to stay behind. Included in the message is coding to give her the same access to all of MOM's assets that I have access to, so you don't have to worry about losing that. Please, do this for me. Give her the same chance I have to see the world as I've had. Once you've found what you need on the server, take the freight platform through the service tunnel and use the emergency freight elevator to return to the service. Once you are there, I will overload the arcane reactors and seal this place and myself forever. Don't bother trying to reconnect to Bit either. I've turned off all outside access except for the connection to this server. Just know that this is what I want, and get on with your life. Right now, I'm going to go and enjoy an entire lifetime's worth of memories with the Matrix I never should have left. I wish you the best of luck in trying to stop 42. Please, don't get yourself killed. Your friend and loyal AP, Pink. The audio log ended with a click, as my pitbuck notified me of a second recording to listen to has been added. Without another thought, Sats ended and threw me back into real time, leaving me speechless. If Pink was really going to try and commit suicide out of some misguided attempt to redeem herself to Bit, I needed to find a way to convince her not to. Brass, we have a bit of a problem, I said as I stood up and pulled the cords out of the port on his flank. There wouldn't have to be an emergency release for your suit, would there? Why? Can't you just reboot it with your pitbuck? He said with a distinct uneasiness in his voice. I've done it already a few times. It's one of the main reasons the Arrangers try to collect so many of those as we can. Well, it's telling me I have an uncompatible version, and that I can't reboot your suit until you update it, I said as I took a step back, raising a hoof to my muzzle as the pungent scent was floating into my nose again. That's impossible. All the suits were updated to 1.3.4 because it is the newest version of the servers. What version did you say it was using? He said as he grunted and tried to move around inside the armor. Version 2.cupcake.1, I said as I face hoofed. Look, I'm sorry I can't fix it right now, but we've got to keep moving. Can you open your suit or not? He let out a small sigh as a small set of clicks ran through his armor, the seams along the plates spreading apart as he pushed his way out. I looked over him as he hopped out and stretched his legs, his darkening skin cracking and peeling in quite a few places now. Oh my, Willow's tone said with a soft tone. I had no idea you were just a colt. I'm not a colt. I'm just small for a stallion, that's all. Brass grumbled as he turned and reached inside of his armor, pulling a small open flap in the padded liner to levitate out a set of yellow straps. Here, you're the only one with the strength to pull it, he said as he shoved the heavily weaved strips against my chest, a pair of hooks slipping inside the sides of the bundles as he levitated them up under the armored chest plate of his suit. I made sure he saw my flat expression as I put my forehooves through the yellow harness. Feeling as Brass levitated my saddlebag open, I watched as he dropped Heartstopper in before he dropped the detached legs and helmet in the suit as well. I shrugged, figuring it would be a lot lighter now, walking forward a few steps before the harness went taut. Brass effortlessly used a telekinesis to nudge the wheeled robot out of the doorway, before turning and disappearing around the corner ahead of me. Willow watched silently as I strained to drag the pre-war armor behind me. Celestia, that's heavy! I grunted as I lowered my center of gravity, trying to lever myself forward. The suit started to slide along the smooth floor, giving way just before my hooves did. I had no choice but to try and keep at a trot, out of fear that if I stopped, I wouldn't have the strength to get it going again. I managed to get out of the door without much finesse, but it took me a good minute to reach the end of the 50-foot hallway, whereupon I collapsed to the floor and panted hard. My heartbeat quickened in my chest, but it was bearable without the pain of the mutation this time. I should get you to do this more often, Sky said, apparently amused at my suffering. It would get you to drop a bit of that extra weight you've been carrying around. I looked up at her as she hovered above me with a wide grin. Fuck you, I said, between heavy breaths. Gave up on putting it softly? I asked, giving her the breast sly grin I could through the sweating and panting. Skyline looked at her forehoof boredly, trying to hide her enjoyment behind her breast straight-faced. It wasn't good enough, cracking as she spoke. Nah, that's Longbow's job. Now that you have somebody else to console you gently about it, I can be as blunt as I want with you. I shook my forehooves at her before propping them back to the ground. You're evil, I said with a small laugh, watching as Longbow trotted up to me with a smile. I watched as her eyes met mine, a flash of guilt running across her face before she stepped over to me. Here, let me take that backlash, she said as her magic slid the yellow straps off of me. Brass filled me on what happened. I'm sorry I gave you those grenades. I should have been more careful and known that they were bad. It's fine. I missed it as well. I groaned and gave her a soft smile. I should have seen it before she had given them to me. But no, I'm Mr. Not-So-Smart Pony today. I took another minute to lay on the floor to get my strength back, watching as Longbow dragged the armor down the hallway to the lift that would take us down to the other level. Stupid cheat suits and their unfair strength. I thought about Pink's note, talking to myself quietly, to try and work through it, while the gears in my head did their best to find an answer. What do I do? Do I try and talk her out of it? Do I have the right to tell her she can't kill herself? Do I have to forcibly stop her? How would I do that? Should I just let her go through with it? I shook my head swiftly, trying to get that last thought from my mind. What about Bit? Shouldn't she have a say in all this? Willow's head peered through the wall, drawing my attention up to her. Oh, is this a bad time? She spoke up as she extruded embarrassment. I'll let you be. No, wait. I called up, making her stop halfway back through the wall. You've been pretty quiet so far. Is there something you wanted to talk about? I slowly got to my hooves, backing up as she stepped out of the hallway next to me. I don't know exactly how to say this. She spoke softly, keeping her head low. When you tried to comfort me from before, I could hear the most beautiful song coming from all around me. But when you backed away, it stopped. She sniffled as she shook slightly. I've heard that song before. Please, you have to let me hear it again. A song? I scrunched my muzzle in thought. I don't think there was any music around. I'm pretty sure my Pitbox radio was off. No, it wasn't in the room, she said with a hint of sad frustration. It was coming from everywhere, but only when you reached out to help me. Her voice shifted to desperation. Please, you need to try. I need to be sure. I don't see why not, I said, slowly sticking my hoof out to her chest. I looked up as she stared down at me, a small frown on her muzzle. "I don't understand," she said softly, sounding like she was on the verge of tears. "It was there before. I distinctly remember it was the same song." I sighed and dropped to my hooves. "I'm sorry it didn't work. Maybe it wasn't me, and you'll find another way to hear it again?" I turned and walked towards Skye and the others. Maybe her mind wasn't all back with her after she became ethereal, but who am I to say? Maybe she really did hear a song. The slow notes drifted to my ears from behind me, the sweet tune resonating in my mind as a flood of emotions ran through me. My rear hooves slipped and gave out from under me as Will-O-Wisp's delicate voice filled the hallway. The song my mother sang to me echoed all around me. I couldn't move at all as my chest tightened, and I felt the sorrow well up into my mind, replayed the moments I still had of her. How do you know that song?" I said in a low voice, turning my neck slowly to look at Willow. She stopped singing as I glared, finding my hooves again before turning and walking back to her. "I asked you how you knew that song!" I slammed my hoof on the floor as I yelled. "Backlash, is everything all right?" Skye called out in concern, my mind pushing her voice to the back of my head. It came from you," Willow said as she sat back, quaking slightly in fear. "You said you'd heard it before. When?" I screamed out at her. She had to have learned it from my mother. Maybe there was a chance she was still alive. "Backlash, calm down!" Skye yelled as I stared into Willow's eyes, grabbing me by the collar to put my flak vest in and try to drag me away. I lowered my center of gravity and dragged my hooves against the floor, straining to stay put as she pulled with all of her strength. It was hardly a week after I had joined Unity when she found a severely injured earth pony mare lying along the side of the road. The goddess had assessed that she would not live much longer without immediate help, and informed her that she could be saved, if only she agreed to join us. Willow said calmly, guilt welling up in each of her words as she spoke them. The mare refused, saying that she would rather suffer her death 1,000 times rather than be saved by the likes of her. That she knew that the goddess would just go looking for her family and turn them into monsters as well. Skye stopped tugging on me as her anger drained away quickly, leaving only the sadness of the song had brought as my legs went weak. Willow frowned as she continued. The goddess took great offense to how she spoke, using her magic to torture the mare. But the mare started to hum that song instead of screaming. The sound of it seemed to shake the very foundation of the goddess's mind. The goddess forced the pain it caused onto us as she tried to silence the mare, but she couldn't feed it to us fast enough. The song stopped when the mare finally died of her wounds, but the echoes of it resonated inside of her for days. The pain it continued to cause her was unimaginable. I felt as Skye wrapped her hooves around me, holding herself close as I stood in complete shock. "Mom," I whispered under my breath. It was all my fault." "Backlash, you know that's not true." Skye spoke softly into my ear as she rubbed my mane. "You jumped in to save me, remember?" She kissed my forehead as I felt a tear fall from her cheek. "You even told me for years that you would have made the same choice, right?" I nodded as I tried to stem the flow of tears trailing down my own cheeks. "You're right," I said as I turned to look up at Willow. "Thank you for telling me, for giving me some sort of closure." "I'm sorry about your mother," she said as she reached a hoof over to comfort me. Waves of joy and happiness seemed to flow through me as her hoof passed into my shoulder. The soft melody of Mother's voice rang in my ears as all the sadness, regret, and grief melted away. I laughed slightly as both Willow and I smiled brightly towards one another, her ghostly aura shifting quickly from pale white to a prismatic shine of every color. Whoa! Carlotta and Sky said it nearly the same time. The gears in my head whirled and connected to something from one of my pinky dreams. She had told me that I had a gift inside of me. The same gift she had, to make every pony I met happy. I didn't understand it before, but now I couldn't help but feel that somehow this is what it looked like. What's going on over? Longbow's voice called out from behind me, stopping short as I assumed she viewed the ethereal multicolored holocorn. What happened? She resumed to ask as she trotted towards us quickly, looking over Willow intently. I think I made her happy, I said slowly. The words seemed to push themselves out of my muzzle. I don't know how I did it, but I think I literally made her happy. Longbow put a hoof to her muzzle and looked in puzzlement for a moment, slowly nodding as she looked back over to me. Yes, that would explain it then. She smiled and cleared her throat, raising a hoof to speak, only to have Carlotta cut her off. Before you start going on about that super science, what's a who's it, what's it stuff, can you please tone it down for us simple-minded folk? She spouted in her normal, irritated attitude. Fine, I'll accommodate you, Longbow said while air-quoting with her hooves. Back before the war, the Crystal Empire was protected by a special magical barrier. I looked over as Carlotta had already raised her talons in the air, trying to ask a question. Longbow sighed and rolled her eyes. The Crystal Empire is a small area of land in the north of the Crystal Mountains. Carlotta lowered her talon with a smirk. As I was saying, this magical barrier was powered by a single, large crystalline heart. The heart would supposedly take all the positive emotions from the ponies living there and transform it into a magical, multicolored field. This field was used to repel most dark forms of magic and reorganize the inhabitants' molecular structure into a crystalline lattice network. Thus the reason for their name. Longbow paused for a moment, letting that information sink in. The gears in my head were on a roll, pun intended, as they crunched yet another thought into my mind. You said that the beam that hit Willow had the same crystal properties or something, right? I said quickly, my smile growing wider as she nodded. That's right, Backlash. When the beam changed her molecular structure, it must have... She paused again as Carlotta raised her talon, yet again. Carlotta, I'll explain whatever it is you want to know after this. Carlotta grumbled and stretched her wings out, taking off down the hall towards the elevator. Anyway, I don't know if they planned on it, or if it's just an unexpected byproduct, but it seems that she's radiating the positive emotions that you fed to her, acting in a way of a small crystal heart. Willow laughed and jumped in the air, flying forward down the hallway, passing through all of us as she continued. My mother's song played in my head, again, as I felt another wave of happiness spread through me. Both Longbow and Sky giggled and smiled as they felt the effects as well. I looked back, noting that the rainbow shine was noticeably dimmer around Willow's body. Maybe every time the effect was used, the emotional charge got lower. But if that's so, was it possible to just charge her up again, right? And it would seem that physical interaction can transfer the feeling to another object. Longbow said as she closed her eyes. But what's this song I hear? It was something my mother sang to my brother and I said as I got to my hooves. Walking up to Longbow, slowly, as she opened her eyes, staring at me with a bright blush. She would have liked you, you know? I said slowly. Some part of me deep down knew that to be true as Longbow nodded, her bright eyes full of what seemed like endless wonder and happiness as she looked back at me. I leaned forward, pressing into her muzzle as I felt her do the same. My ears perked, and I broke the soft kiss as I heard the flutter of wings, Skyline taking off down the hall and zooming around the corner as I heard Carlotta yelp and fall to the floor. Longbow wrapped her armored hooves around me as she hummed the tune softly into my ear. the still turning gears in my head threw out another thought. A thought that I couldn't ignore the slightest possibility that even remotely correct. I turned my head over to Willow, calling out to her as she stood with a smile. I think you just gave me a way to stop the goddess. For good.